Hi everyone, and welcome to another review by ThinkerThemer. I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie. Hello. I'm all about the mechanics, Maggie is all about the theme, and today we are really excited to be reviewing Ahoy by Leader Games and designer Greg Loring Albright. So let's get into it.
All right, in Ahoy we are playing as different seafaring creatures, all with our own unique agenda. So you've got the Bluefin Squadron, who's at the moment has taken control of the land and is putting patrols out everywhere, making sure that they keep that majority over everything. And then you've got the Mollusc Union, who are the original owners of the land, going, this is not right. We're going to fight back. We're going to get rid of those sharks everywhere. And then you've got the smugglers, who are really just trying to keep the economy alive. So they're smuggling goods, taking them to the needy, or taking them to whoever has the most coin. And ultimately, the way we're going to decide, well, who wins, because we all have different agendas, is whoever ends up having the most fame or being the best at what it is that you're trying to achieve.
Now, the most unique part of how this game plays is that everybody has a unique asymmetric faction. And in a two-player game, which I'm going to start with because it helps to break this down, you are only going to be able to play as the Bluefin Squadron, or the oppressors, or the Mollusc Union, who are the oppressed. And these two factions are going to be going head-to-head in an area control game. And that takes place on these sea tiles or regions that are going to be explored from the tile deck. Now, the way that the game works mechanically is simply that on your turn, you are going to be placing two of the dice that you've rolled at the start of the round onto your player board in order to activate different actions. Some of the actions are going to be unique to your particular faction, but when we think about the Mollusc Union versus the Bluefin Squadron, ultimately what we're trying to do is to have more of our pieces control each of these regions in order to win the victory points that is depicted by a die that is sitting in the center of the tile. So what you're going to be doing as both parties is moving your flagship around, which is your big main ship represented by the board, and you're going to be able to place die down on your board in order to sail. And when you sail, you can move one or two steps, and there's going to be different types of terrain that are going to change the way your boat operates in that region. For example, you could have a strong current, which is going to push your boat forward in a particular direction. You could have sandbars, which means that you can't cross those sandbars, you've got to go around. So you're trying to navigate your way through each of these different regions. The next thing that both factions share in common is tailwind, and this action essentially acts as a portal that you can jump through or sail through in order to get from one side of the board all the way to the other if you like. And the way it works is the number that you put into this slot on your board correlates to a number that you can see on the board somewhere. So there's a 2 here and my ship is over here. If I was to put a 2 in tailwind, I would be able to jump, ignoring the sandbars and everything else along the way, all the way over to this 2 that is depicted on the board. This means that in this area control game, you can quickly surprise your opponent by jumping all the way over to where they are at or where the points are leading you. And why you might want to end up where your opposing faction is at is because there are battles in this game, fairly simple battles. The way the battle works in this game is that you can load one of your dice as a cannon. So there are particular numbers for the sharks, so it has to be a 5 or a 6. But for Maggie here with the Mollusc Union, you can see you can put any die in there. Once those are locked and loaded, they are going to mean that whenever you cross paths with another ship, if someone has a loaded cannon, a battle is going to ensue. And the way that the cannons work is they are basically a dial that you've placed there that you can turn down in order to add those pips to your battle dice roll. So each player is going to roll a single battle die for the most part and be able to add whatever points they decided to turn down on their cannon to their die result, which means that if you've got cannons loaded, you probably have a better chance of winning. And what's really interesting is that each faction has a different benefit of winning a battle, and that's depicted on your player board itself. But the most interesting things are you can steal coin, and coin are really important in this game because they allow you to change the die result. So +1 or -1 when you spend a coin. Or you can deal damage, and damage is really fun in this game because if I was to damage Maggie's faction, I take one of these damage pieces and I get to choose the die slot where I put that little shot of damage, which means now Maggie cannot place a die there.
Blocked from action.
Blocked from that particular action. So you can try and anticipate what your opponent is going to do and block that before they get a chance to do it. But of course, you can always repair your ship. So one of the choices on your player board is to repair your ship to remove those points of damage. The final thing you can do to help yourself in this battle is to recruit crew. And so there is a marketplace where there are always 3 cards available, and each of these cards have some kind of ability that crew member is going to allow you to get done that kind of breaks the rules of the game or gives you some kind of advantage in battles and that type of thing. If you want to recruit these, the interesting thing is that each of these cards has a suit, and you need to be, for the most part, at the island that depicts that suit in order to recruit something from the market, and you need to pay the cost associated with that crew member. Once you're able to recruit it, you would put it at the top of your player board, and then from then on you are able to use that ability. So let's talk briefly about how these 2 different factions are going to try and get control over the board. So if you are the Sharks or the Bluefin Squadron, you are going to be moving around, and every time you anchor your ship, whether that's you stop sailing or you do that portal action and tailwind, you're going to be dropping these patrols. And the patrols are these little shark fins, which are really
cool.
cute. And you're going to be dropping them all over the board. And the reason why you want to do that is because these patrols are worth 1 point of control. So in this region here, there is only 1 patrol and nothing else in this region, which means that I've got 1 point and Maggie has nothing, so I would earn that 1 victory point. And here you can see there are more things vying for control. Our ship, or my ship, is worth 2 points of control. Maggie's ship is worth 1. And Maggie has these little comrades, which I'll talk about in a moment. But here she would have 3 points of control, and I've got 3 points of control, so no one would win this victory point. The other thing that you can do as the shark is if you are able to get 2 of these patrols into an island area, either by dropping them there when your ship gets there, or by using the order movement action to move those patrols into an island area. At the end of your turn, you can swap those 2 patrols for a stronghold. And a stronghold is like having a cannon, like castle thing on the island that is, I don't know the proper
always
term.
ready.
Always ready to fight.
A stronghold, if you will.
It's a stronghold. And when people are going to go to those islands in order to get things done in the game, they are going to be attacked by your stronghold, which means that you're always trying to kind of attack other players and hinder their progress. But the other thing is, wherever you place a stronghold, it's going to give you access to that suit. And remember, I said that you need to have access to that suit in order to recruit crew members of that same suit. Now, the other thing that the Bluefin Squadron can get done and needs to get done is really using this bombard action. When I place specifically a 4 here, and remember you can adjust the die value, if I place a 4 here, it's going to wipe out all of the comrades in my flagship's region. So that's these little tiles here. And I haven't spoken about these tiles yet, these comrades of Maggie's, but definitely the Bluefin Squadron is trying to clear them out in order to get rid of their control in the different regions. So, as you can imagine, the Mollusk Union, or Maggie's faction, is really trying to place all of these comrades out onto the board. And the way that Maggie is going to do that is not strictly through battling and fighting, kind of like the sharks, but Maggie is going to inspire the comrades to like join the cause, if you will. And so the way that she's going to do that is to having to ready comrades first. So there's a supply of comrades, but they can't be used until they're placed on her player board as ready. And once they're ready, there are different actions that are going to allow her to place them out onto this board, and I'm going to try and remove them. But the other advantage is that comrades can't be fought against. So I can't just use brute force to remove them. I really need to do that bombard action to remove them from the board. And the Mollusk Union has a unique set of cards. And this is where this faction becomes quite interesting, because every round you're going to get 2 of these special cards, and you can save them up if you want, or you can use them throughout the round. But each of the cards has a really powerful ability that's going to give you an advantage in a battle, or allow you to put more comrades out or ready more comrades, and basically give you quite a strong advantage. And so on top of recruiting crew members, Maggie's able to use these special cards to surprise her opponent. And it's just a really interesting game of looking at the cards in your hand and working out the best timing to place those out to help you go forward in the game. As the game progresses, we're going to be exploring other areas and revealing more tiles that we're able to move into and get control of. Every time a new tile is revealed, it's given 1 point. In a 2-player game. At the end of the round, someone gets to decide which region is going to increase in value. And as you can imagine, as this becomes 4 or 5 points worth of value, then it's going to intensify the area control game for that particular region so that you can get as many points as possible. And the way that the points works, or the fame, is that at the end of every round, we are going to score each one of these regions. So the points really build quite quickly as the game progresses. The game is going to end as soon as any one person crosses the 30-point mark, and then it's the person who has the most victory points at the end of the game. In a 2-player game with these 2 area control factions, mostly the game is just going to end as soon as someone crosses 30 and has the most points. Now, what happens in a 3 or 4 player game? If you're playing with 3 or 4 players, you're going to introduce a new type of faction, and they are called the Smugglers. And they are both identical in terms of the mechanics and their options in terms of their player boards. But the Smugglers are playing a completely different game. They're not engaged in this area control battle at all. In fact, what they're trying to get done is a pick up and deliver game. So if you're playing as a smuggler, and Maggie's just throwing all the pieces around, if you're playing as a smuggler, you're going to be using the crew cards in a very different way. You can still recruit them and use them as crew, but more importantly, you're going to be trying to get your flagship to particular islands that depict the suit. So for example, this one is an orange compass. That would allow me to pick up this orange compass card at no cost and put it in my cargo. And I can have 2 pieces of cargo, or 2 cards stored here. And so you can see that this has the orange compass in the top left-hand corner, but in the right bottom-hand corner, it has another suit depicted, and that is where I need to drop off this piece of cargo. So now I'm going to have to navigate my ship from this island over to this island here that has the correct suit on it in order to be able to deliver this piece of cargo and then hopefully recruit more, and so on and so forth. When I am able to drop off this cargo, it's going to give me fame, so it's going to help me, get closer to winning the game. It's also going to give me some kind of advantage on my reward little grid here. And this is an interesting little game where you're moving these cubes around, and then you're able to collect things like extra fame or extra coins that are going to help progress you in the game. The other interesting thing about delivering, or probably the most interesting thing about delivering these goods to the correct island, is that every time you do, it impacts the value of this region. And really, that's how these 4 players are coming together, because the smugglers are moving around, changing the value of the regions, and the two players who are playing as the Bluefin Squadron, the Mollusk Union, are then going to fight over those points. And so with two smugglers moving around, you can imagine that the point value of each region is changing quite rapidly. The other investment that smugglers have in what the other two players are doing in terms of the area control game is that when I deliver one of these pieces of cargo, I'm going to predict which player is going to have more control over the region of the suit depicted on the card in the top left-hand corner. And the way that I'm going to predict that is through two hidden tokens, one representing each of these factions that are going to be face down, and I'm going to pledge that I think Maggie might win the area control game in this particular, or regions that have this particular suit depicted. So I'm going to put this under Maggie's pledge token. And at the end of the game, we are going to see if those predictions came true, and they're going to add fame points, which is why there are quite a few hidden points in this game if you're playing with smugglers. So someone might cross the 30 mark, but then after we've looked at those tallies, one of the smugglers might pull out in front. And that's basically how you play Ahoy. But now let's talk about how we felt about the game.
Okay, so maybe we'll talk about it the way that we played it, like essentially our journey with it.
The way we experienced it.
And the way that you taught it as well. So starting with that 2-player mode, because that's how we first played it, and that area control, because it's almost like two mini games within a game. It's like there's the area control game and there's the pick up and deliver game that the smugglers are doing. So let's talk about the area control head to head, oppressor versus the oppressed experience. I did not enjoy that because it's very, very, again, I'm just going to say it's very, very confrontational, and it's very like, it's a tug of war, push and pull. And I personally don't like that style of game. That's not to say that it's badly done. Like it actually is very well done, and so I don't like feeling like I'm like being the oppressed, or even when I'm being the oppressor, I'm like, oh, I just don't like, being in that state of like, okay, what are they gonna do, and where am I gonna chase them, what am I gonna, or it's like they're coming after me. It's like I think it very it creates that energy very well. And it's not an energy that I like. So that's why for me, like, I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and whether you're playing as either of these two more aggressive factions, you're building up presence. And so you are trying to put things on the board. And the sole purpose of the other character is really to take things off the board. And if you're a person that doesn't like Maggie, when you're building up your sandcastle and someone's coming over to purposely kick it down, well, then you're probably not going to enjoy the 2-player experience of this, or playing as either one of these factions, because it is quite an aggressive style of gaming. You are vying over a very few number of regions because you can very easily get from one region to another. It doesn't take much in order to be able to confront someone's buildings and bring them crashing down. And so because of the small game space, so if you think about a game like Root, it is a much bigger play space, and while it still has some aggressive factions, it's kind of harder to get from one end of the board to the other, or there's a lot to consider. This is a very distilled board, and everybody has a lot of pieces everywhere, and there's going to be a lot of battles that happen, and they need to happen in order to win as these two factions. You really need to be focused.
There's no like alternative way of getting points if you're playing as one of these two. It's like you're going after the other, you're getting dominance in those areas, and that's how you're scoring your points.
Generally, the aggressor is probably going to be able to win if the other person is avoiding confrontation.
Well, yeah, and I did try that at one point. I was like, maybe I can just, go around exploring the map, because as you're exploring, you're opening the map up, and it's a pretty cool setup, like the way that all the tiles, once they're laid out, you're creating the sort of swirly seas. And I'm like, I can just, as soon as I land somewhere, I'll drop off some of my comrades, and so I did get an early advantage of just spreading out everywhere. But then soon after, the shark sharks came coming in, bombarding all my poor people away.
That was me. And as I mentioned, because you have that tailwind action or the portal action, it's very quick to travel across the board, pop up somewhere, and then destroy someone's element of control.
Chaos.
Yeah, create some chaos. And because of that ability to, change the die value with coins, it means that it's always worthwhile battling as well to steal someone's coins, because that impacts not only your ability for future dice placements to change the value of your die, it also stops them from changing their die value as well. And so I want to talk about this from the perspective of someone who loves a game like chess, a very head-to-head battle, and I also really adore area control. And my experience of this game really evolved the more I played it. I played extensively as both of these characters. I was able to work out how to win as both of these factions. But
I've never won this game. Not in all our plays of this game.
But what I found was really interesting is just once you understand, like any game that has asymmetric factions, once you've played as both, you can really anticipate what the other person is going to try to do in order to reduce your control in different regions. So for example, the Bluefin Squadron, they want to be playing fours as much as possible in this bombard to get rid of your comrades if you're playing as the mollusc
I hate that
union.
bombard.
It is awful because in one foul swoop, it removes all the comrades in one region, but they need to have a 4. So if you get rid of their coins and you can see they don't have a 4, well, then that's going to really tie their hands for that entire round. I also like an element that I didn't talk about in that the Bluefin Squadron has one extra die, which means that they have a slight advantage in that they're always going to have a third turn where they get to do one action, and it occurs after everybody has finished placing everything. So in that one move, you might be able to slightly shift the control in one region, for example, to win some points at the very end. So I feel like these two factions are really well balanced, because the Mollusc Union, if you can really master the timing of when you play these cards, I think, and also predict what the Bluefin Squadron is going to do, it's just really a really fascinating kind of area control game. And it feels really intensely interesting in terms of like the movement and the shift of who's going to win points that round. And it feels also quite tight in terms of what you can get done, because every round you're only having 4 or 5 actions, core actions on the board.
I think if you're the Mollusc Union, the cards are really essential. So with the cards, the other things that we haven't really mentioned is one of the things that you can do is you can actually, you've got an extra 2 ships that you can deploy, but that's only if, once you get to those cards. And they act as either another way, so you can see that they actually give you more spots to put dice into. And that's essentially allowing you to either sail or tailwind, but also that's if you get attacked, if that ship is out and that ship gets attacked, then that attack doesn't cover, so those spaces wouldn't get covered over here. Thank you. So they'll start to cover that gunship itself. So I think with the other cards as well, I felt that it was actually quite thematic in terms of the way that the Mollusc Union works is you're very much about trying to, you know the land better because this is your land. So you're able to pop up in different areas. So with your Inspire and Rally, like you're able to, one of your actions is you're allowed to then put up to 4 different comrades tokens in 4 different areas across the board, no matter where your ship, your flagship may be. And then things like if you see that, that bluefin coming your way, that flagship, they're going to bombard me. There is a card that allows you to evacuate. So if you've got an island where you've got a lot of presence there, you can go, play that evacuate if you have it in your hand, and then move those comrades somewhere else so that you don't lose them as part of that attack. So if you're playing as the Mollusc Union, you really need to be comfortable with card actions and kind of keeping track of what are the cards that I have.
Yeah, and I think what's another interesting element about that is that they're a one-use card, and once they're used, they get discarded out of the game, and so they are limited in their supply. You're only getting 2 fresh ones each round. So I found that really interesting about the game too. However, I would like to do. So it's a very aggressive game,
Extremely,
and it is
yeah.
extremely focused on these two. Obviously, there's two factions in a two-player game. But then, what happens when you introduce the smugglers?
Yeah.
So the smugglers are going to be playing kind of their own mini game
Yeah.
in that they're doing the pick up and deliver, and they are around these two main factions, but not necessarily engaging with them too much.
No, so you might end up in conflict. You might end up in a battle as a smuggler. If, for example, you were to go into an island where there's a stronghold there, or there's someone there with loaded cannons. Because as soon as you're encountering someone with loaded cannons, like, well, a fight has to happen. I don't know why. It's like, why? I guess. Yeah, it makes sense. But it's like, you look like you're up for violence, so we have to defend. So that can trigger. Aside from that, the focus of the game of the smugglers, you're really just looking at optimizing your route, kind of moving around, so that you can go hopefully to an island where I can pick up. Oh, if I go to an island where I can pick up those the palm trees, or ideally if I end up with a double cargo that delivers to the same place. Great, let me go to that place and drop off, double, do a much more efficient drop off, get a lot of points, get more of these rewards. I really, really enjoy this little reward mini map, because the way it works is when you do a drop off, you do your so for example, I don't actually have any of the cards here. So let's say that we actually have the purple one there. So let's say that I had picked this one up. So this one needed to be picked up where at a palm tree island, which I'm not showing here yet. But say once that is there, now I need to drop it off at the purple fish skeleton island. When I go to that purple fish skeleton and I drop it off, this would move up. So now it's a very, very valuable area. That doesn't really affect me all that much. But then I get 2 points. I get to move my reward die. So here, this minigame is that you get to decide which direction you're going to go. You're always going to have to move adjacent to wherever your crystal cube is, like your main cube that you're going to be moving. So for example, if I were to move here, I get to add an extra tile to the map. If I were to go here, I get to recruit a crew member. If I go here, I get coin. And so I start looking at the rewards on the edges are by far the most lucrative ones. So for example, if I manage to make my way all the way up here, there's going to be 4 points that I'm going to be able to do. But the interesting thing with this is it's got this black cube follow mechanism. That means that once I move here, after I do my second drop off, if I move there and I go, great, 2 points, that black cube is always going to be following. So it's preventing me from going backwards. So sometimes as you're kind of moving your way up, you go, great, now it's like, now I'm stuck here, because ideally I would be able to kind of go back and forth. And so when I'm going here, like now I have to go all the way around to try and access those things in the corner. I actually really enjoyed this element. It's kind of, I think because I'm much more of a multiplayer solitaire person, it's like, I can just be worrying about what's going to be the next reward that I'm going to get, and how am I going to be planning, my picking up and dropping off, and not worrying about all the gunpowder and fighting that's happening over there, because you can sort of just sail away.
And that's the feeling. That's the feeling of the smugglers.
Yeah.
It's a much more passive faction. You can play almost completely ignoring the area control game that's going on. However, I found, pick up and deliver is not my favorite mechanic. I don't enjoy kind of optimizing the route. I find it quite boring, to be honest, to move from one island to the other. So I didn't enjoy that. The thing I was most interested in with the smugglers is how do they interact with the other two factions? Because I wanted to be able to influence the area control game. And there are elements of that. So of course, we've talked about how when you deliver to an island, you increase the region amount. And then at the same time, if you think about what we're doing with pledging, we are trying to gamble who's going to win what. And so you might think that actually the smugglers have a bit of an ability to change the outcome of the game by increasing regions in value related to the kind of places where they want someone to win, or conversely, they might not deliver somewhere if there's someone in control who's about to win the game so that they have a reduced number of points. However, in reality, I found that that was not really prevalent when you're playing this game, because as the smugglers, the majority of your points are coming from the pick up and deliver game, and you have so few actions that if you ignore that part of the game in order to try and kind of influence what's happening with your pledges or influence the area control game, you're going to be taking your eye off the ball. You're not going to be delivering as many of these cards, and the other smuggler is probably likely to beat you because there's so many points come from this little puzzle on your board that if you're not delivering to that, it's really you're going to get like left behind. And so I found that it was an interesting idea in order to have two, you've got essentially two groups of people doing very different things, but I never found that the interaction between them was very interesting. And so when I was playing as one of the aggressive area control factions in a 4-player game, I found that I only cared about the other person that was playing the area control game. I could not care less about what the pick up and deliver thing that was happening.
Would care about the values.
The values of the points. Certainly, I was like, okay, well now I'll go over there, but not enough to interact with them, not enough to fight them. Didn't really care about what they were doing. Very squarely focused on what the other area control player was doing. As the smuggler, I felt really unengaged with the area control game, and I was simply trying to race the other smuggler in order to deliver as much as possible and get around that bonus board as much as possible. And to me, that is just not an interesting game. And I feel as though with this game, I would only ever want to play as the area control factions, but conversely, Maggie would only ever
exact opposite. I would never play this with as one of these two factions because I absolutely every fiber of my being dislikes being in that headspace. And so playing as the smugglers was it's
like the vagabond in Root.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that was this is the only way that I'll play this game. Now, I found it really tricky. Even when I was optimizing my smuggler, it was quite tricky. If you have good players who are playing a very strong game of that area control, the way that they get points, and even when I was kind of maximizing my points, it's felt harder. I have managed to come second with the smuggler, but it felt harder.
But if you had got your predictions right in that game where you came second, if you had got all of them right, you would have won. But that is so in flux, and that's what kind of annoys me about the pledge is that when you are pledging, you're looking at the game state, and yes, you can have mild impact on that, but these two players are being really aggressive, and that is shifting around all the time.
Things change so quickly.
Exactly, that it's actually really hard to predict correctly the end of the game, and so that kind of comes down to I'm just going to say a little bit of luck, but mostly the performance of these two players is going to be really what drives the predictions.
I'm going to say a little bit of luck or extreme king making potentially, because you do have, with the smugglers, you do have the ability of going into areas and getting rid of. So you can do this negotiate action, which means that you can recruit someone without you having to match the suit of the island and without you having to pay it any cost. And then it gives you this extra bonus of you can recruit an extra one for free if you get rid of a comrade.
Yeah, you can do that, but I'm going to argue that I did not feel like the incentives were enough for me to do that.
I agree, and that's the same way that there was some way that I felt. But this is what I mean: you could sort of gang up against one of them and just kind of pledge everything on with the one that you're actually trying to king make.
Yeah.
Because the other option of that would be, well, I could just make sure that I battle a lot and battle the bluefin team and just put everything under the comrades. So there would be ways.
I enjoy the ideas, but if you know that I love interaction in games, you can be sure that I was trying my hardest to interact as the smuggler. I just didn't feel as though I could do that in the context of the extreme amount of points for the pick up and deliver game. And so I really felt like I had to focus on that when playing against another smuggler who was optimizing that well, i.e. Maggie, who was playing a lot with the pick up and deliver.
It's the only way that I'll play this game.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's talk about then what role does this game have in our collection? Because I guess you could say that because we have extremely different game preferences, that there is a player for everyone. So I'm happy playing this little game. Maggie's happy playing this little game. But I'm not sure if it comes together in a way where I actually feel like I'm playing with Maggie in a game in a way that we both enjoy.
Well, not to say we wouldn't be able to play it at a 2-player game because you can't play the smugglers.
Yeah, you'd
have to play it. So I would this is not a game that we would ever play at 2-player because I can't play as one of these two factions. I will also say this is an incredibly and I think part of it because it's incredibly thematic. Like so many of these elements are so that's exactly how you would be feeling if you're the oppressed. That's exactly how you would be acting if you're the oppressor. And as the smuggler, it's you're trying to just be very opportunistic and try and So I think for us, the experience of playing it as we wouldn't be able to play it at a 2-player count. At a 3-player count, throwing in the smuggler.
But even though you enjoyed the smuggler more than this, did you actually enjoy this game?
Absolutely. I would say this is not I enjoyed it as the way of being a part of this game. But would not be the game that I would be hey, I wouldn't suggest to play it just so that I can play the smuggler game.
And that's because I feel like the smuggler element is quite weak, and that's just being completely transparent. I think that had so much potential, but I just wish the integration was more in across the two games. I would happily play this at 2 players. I would happily play it at 4 players, but I'm only focused on the other person playing the area control. And there was a game where we played and my sister was playing as the opposing area control. And I just found at the end of the game, I felt like her and I had played a game and everybody else was just doing something. And her and I were having these intense, aggressive moments. But anyway, I think that because of the game length, I want to mention that as well. The game can easily play in an hour.
Yeah, and at a 4-player.
Yeah, and with the level of complexity and the whatever else is going on the board, I feel like it is this meaty experience for a 1-hour game that is fairly easy to teach. And if you own Root and love Root or other games with asymmetric abilities, it's quite simple to teach this game because there are really just those 2 main components of the area control and the pick up and deliver. And what you're doing each turn is not that difficult. So I feel like this is way more accessible as a game. It's easy to get into. We can teach it very quickly.
Much lower overhead.
And then the game is over in an hour. So I do feel as though our personal feelings aside, a lot of people are really going to love this game and how interesting it feels to really explore the different factions. So whether or not will it stay in our collection? Probably not.
No, not for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so either, only because I enjoyed it 2 players. Maggie's never going to play the aggressive game with me.
Yeah. So I'll, just to be part of the conversation, I'll play as the smuggler, but I've never, but it's more just to be in it and
which you can't do it
something.
2 players.
No,
yeah. And so at a 3-player game, I really need to find other people that enjoy area control, that aggressive area control, and I never want to play as the smuggler. So for me, that means that this game probably will get limited table time in our collection. Unfortunately, we'll move it on to a household that will enjoy all of those things.
I would say I do love the artwork and the components of it, and I do feel like that is one little thing that pulls me in. That I'm look, I'll play as a smuggler gladly. I'm not going to suggest to play it, but it's I love the cards. I love the artwork and all the cards as it comes through. So
yeah, and I will say I've enjoyed my time with it. I've enjoyed exploring, and I found myself waking up thinking about the area control game. So I do think that is really expertly crafted in this. I just wish the Smugglers had a little more oomph, and then this would probably be right up there in terms of games that I love. So anyway, that's our review of Ahoy. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more game reviews soon. But otherwise, bye for now. Bye.